Hello, everyone. Welcome at Apidays Interface, our online main event. Again, thanks to the hard work of all the teams. Now we're back to in-person event this year, but also we've listened to you. We've kept our main online events to be able to attract speakers that are really hard to get, that don't travel anymore, but they will be there because it's online. So let's keep that opportunity to have speakers that could not travel, but that can be there with us today. My name is Mehdi Medjawi. I'm the founder and chairman of Apidays Conferences, and we're really glad to have you for these next 2 days of talks about the APIs economy, and the technical aspect, of course, technological aspect about APIs. So before starting, let's share some information about API Days and also what we will be covering today. So the main theme of the event is APIs the next 10 years on the business side, on the technical side. On the business side, it will be really about like how opening APIs internally or externally can help you think in a platform way or in an ecosystem way, how we can maybe network ecosystems to accumulate more value, right? But who will be the winners? Who will be the losers? On the technical side, we'll try to explore what we call the new API stack. What are the new tools, the new vendors, the new technologies, the new protocols, enabling to build APIs that will power this new platform or this new orchestrated network economy. The name of the event is Interface because actually this is the role of API Days is to connect the humans behind APIs. Again, we have interfaces everywhere, screens, in human-machine interface. We have like APIs, but again, they're humans. There are still humans behind these interfaces, and so API Days is the conference to make them being together and to connect them, right? So let's connect the humans behind the APIs before connecting the APIs together. During the last 2 years, COVID has really impacted the conferences space. We kept on, and actually, we're really glad to say that we thanks to the community, thanks to the industry, we're there, and we're back in in-person events for the rest of the year. To tell you more about our event series, we have different events. Again, if you are interested for more, you can go on our website, apidays.global. To know more, but here we're at Apidays Interface, the main online event, and so this is why we're really glad to have you. So API Days, it's 10th year of existence, like 9+1, with 75 more events. Actually, all the sponsors of the industry have supported us so far. 70,000 past attendees for an online community of 300,000 members. So yeah, everyone who is interested by APIs on the business side or the technical side is aware of API Days conferences, has probably attended, probably spoken at API Days. So the hashtag of the event, it's API Days Interface, and the main handle, Twitter handle, is API Days Global, the official account of API Days. And a little bit more about API Days. So we don't only do events. We help companies doing consulting, like a strategy with APIs. We help company hire. The only thing we can't scale is the human resources. So we really help company hire in API jobs, API related roles. We still do our research, so specific papers, industry research, industry landscapes, and we'll have a surprise for you today about these industry landscapes. We're able to organize classes, training, and deliver content on our community-driven media platform. I will tell you a little bit more about that right after. So, but everything around event and in between event can be done with the API Days network. 3 initiatives we really want to talk about that really are important for us. The first one is women in APIs. Of course, in the tech industry, we don't have enough diversity, especially gender diversity. So yeah, we fight for that. So we created a Women in API community. It's a community helping being seen and being heard, right? Especially for many reasons. That can be explained by many ways, but let's say there are not enough female speakers at conferences. And so we want to fight that. So we identified one of the main reasons is that we don't have enough female in the CFP, the call for papers. So we can't do an unbiased selection there. So we decided to be able to have an equal number of genders represented in the call for papers. So this program is really about fostering diversity and talent in the API community. And the goal is to encourage, support, coach people who feel represented by the female gender to be coached and trained to become speakers at especially API conferences and other tech conferences, right? So you can join the Women in API program. We really thank our past support like Stoplight and Twilio for supporting that. And again, it's a really a good community that you can join. The second initiative we're running is the Sustainable Digital Challenge. So we've done the third edition this year. It's a 3-month program for every corporation, large, the public sector, private company, or even startups, to onboard a full team, a full technology team, product, business, and tech, right? To really rethink their whole application infrastructure according to eco-design principles. So we talk about the code, of course, we talk about the architecture, we talk about the design, the UX. We also talk about the hardware and, let's say, the data center strategy, about how to think in a, let's say, less consuming energy and lower carbon digital infrastructure. So again, this is a program you can join at any time. The last initiative I really want to talk about is the APIscene media platform. It's a community-driven media platform about APIs. Most of the time, speakers love to make a written version of their talk. If you don't have the time to listen to a 25-minute video, they often make a 5-minute read article that explain and sum up a little bit what they have said. So you can go on apiscene.io to be able to know more about this initiative. So today, what to expect? After the 2 great keynotes we've gathered, really about the deep research on APIs, we will have 3 tracks. 1 track on API platforms and product strategies that can be identified as the business track. We have also the technical track called the new API tech stack with all the new recent tools and platforms and developer can use. Right, to build APIs. And then we have roundtables and hands-on workshop to know exactly about what's possible to do in the space in the 3rd track. So after the keynotes, I invite you to decide which track where you want to be for today. Of course, you can change at any time. We really want to thank our sponsors enabling this event to be free and accessible online, but powering and all the machinery behind this. The first one is IBM. Yes, IBM is following us in many places. They are a leader in API management, recognized in almost every Forrester or Gartner research. So they have a booth, online booth at the event, so don't hesitate to look at what they're doing on the API management space. We also have gold sponsors with Web Security, WSO2, and Red Hat. So Web is really specialized in API security, where WSO2 and Red Hat are 2 great open source API management solutions, also recognized as top vendors by top analysts. So we invite you to look at their booth if you're interested in what they're delivering. We also want to thank silver sponsors like Traceable and Sensedia, or bronze sponsor like RapidAPI, Postman, 8x8, DataStax, and Apiwiz, who are helping us to make that even happen. So after, as a second keynote, we will talk about the state of the API industry 2022, a landscape of more than 1,000 companies where we collect all the data, analytics, funding, turnover, and we try to give you a hint about what's happening in the state of the API industry. I will be making that presentation. It's a 2-year research business data there, but we're really glad to open the conference with a speaker we always dreamed about to have him as the conference. It was really, he's someone extremely busy and that was who was traveling a lot before COVID. But yes, all the community wanted to listen from him in the past 10 years. Finally, he accepted to be there on our invitation. We're really glad to have him. It's Marcia Von Elstein. Hello, Marshall.
Hello.
Yeah, we hope you're doing well and doing okay. And yes, we invite you to share your slides with us. And you're really recognized in the world for your deep research on information theory, markets, intellectual property at Boston University, Western Business School of Business. Again, your name doesn't need to be let's say your research doesn't need to be explained so much. Like a lot of people love what you're doing. So we're really glad to have you. And we invite you to share your talk about technology, digital transformation, and platforms. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure, Mehdi. Thank you much for the introduction. Again, honored to be here. I'm hoping that this will be valuable to everybody. I want to start with two simple ideas before really going into the main talk. And the first of these, really quite simply, unfortunately, I was diagnosed with COVID just this morning. So I'm not feeling terribly well. If I seem a little bit slow, well, that's just me. I'm hoping that can actually, and just seemed too late. I didn't want to be here to see if I could be here for all of you. But the second is actually just to offer all of you a compliment, because I honestly think that the chief officers in almost any organization underappreciate the value of technology. What I do with just this observation is simply point to technology as strategy. I think what APIs do is they enable strategy in a way that is not appreciated. I think all too often it's viewed simply as infrastructure. I want to give you both data, facts that you can use in arguments today, but also logic as to why these things are so important. To give you a tiny summary of it, one is just thinking of APIs as determining permissions and contracts, who has access to what resources. It also determines who's a partner. This goes to what's outside in innovation. Can you capture ideas from outside the organization? Can you capture ideas from inside the organization and push them out into the marketplace? APIs enable modularity. They enable what should be inside the platform and what should be outside the platform. They help with evolution and scale. So again, it's a hats off to this community. And I want to show you why I think this is important. So jumping into the agenda, what I want to cover is one, just the evidence that business models are manifestly different than before. We'll start with just a little bit overview and some evidence of that. Then I want to provide you research that shows that those firms adopting APIs grew an average of 38% in market value over 16 years compared to non-adopters. That's huge growth. If you think of the return on investment for that compared to alternative investments, it's a staggering return. The last thing we'll cover is using technology to drive some network effects. I'll give you an example of how one might actually do that. So that's really the agenda for today. So what is different this time? So if you've seen the work that I've been doing in platforms, we'll start with a couple of just basic observations. One of these is just changes in the industry. So if you look at the banking sector, these are the top 7 firms in each industry. If you look at the banking sector, they're worth about 1.4 trillion. If you look at the energy sector, they're worth about 2.6 trillion. And the technology sector, 8.2 trillion. It's quite remarkable. The prior drivers of the economy used to be rivalrous goods, effectively energy and finance were the principal drivers. And now I would argue it's information. And we can actually see it in the market cap of the 7 dominant firms. Another one that you can take a look at is how is the asset base changed over the last 40 years? In the 1970s, 83% of firm market value in the S&P 500 was based on tangible goods. As of 7 years ago, it was a complete reversal with 84% based on intangible assets. It's further evidence that information and data matters, just as the elements of that. To drive this home a bit further, if you look back at 2010 versus 2021, it was obvious that the only two in 2010, the dominant firms were energy and finance and banking. Apple and Microsoft were in the list, but it wasn't that big. If you look at it today, 7 of the top 10 firms are the platform firms. Everyone knows that. One of the things that's often overlooked, however, is the ratio of market value to assets. If you compare BMW to Uber, or Marriott to Airbnb, or Walt Disney to Facebook, what you see is that in the last decade or so, these firms have come from almost nowhere in terms of the evolution of firms. So BMW, for example, was founded over a century ago, 1916. Marriott, again, 1927. Or IBM, founded in 1911 here. If you look at the number of employees per market cap, the platform firms have orders of magnitude higher. So the amount of market cap per employee for Uber is about 12 times that for BMW, or staggeringly, the market cap for Facebook relative to Walt Disney per employee is 15 to 20 times Walt Disney. The key difference is that third parties are creating the value. So third parties are creating the rides on Uber, the rooms on Airbnb, the content on Facebook. The posts on Twitter relative to the editors at the New York Times. It's a big change in the business model. In some sense, we call these inverted firms because much of the value is being created outside the organization rather than inside the organization. The most recent list of most famous companies is here. These are the 2021 most famous brands by Interbrand. They produce something every October, and here's the top 50. Here, almost the entire top row, of course, is effectively some of the platform companies. So if you look at the one shaded in blue, it includes Amazon and Apple and Microsoft and Google and Samsung and others. What's also interesting is the gray companies that are seeking to become platforms. I wouldn't necessarily count Netflix as a platform company, but they're seeking to move in that direction. GE is an example of trying to move in that direction. They did not do so well. There are some other elements of design working on that. Some of the companies in automotive, Toyota, Mercedes, are seeking to become platform companies. How is value creation different in a platform company? How do we get these antitrust scale monopolies? Again, to quickly revisit some prior research, one of the things that led to antitrust scale monopolies a century ago with GE and electricity, or automotive and Ford, or motorcycles, or iron, or oil, or railroads, or supply side economies of scale, high fixed cost, low marginal cost. As you got volume, you lowered price, you killed the competition. This gave you volume, which lets you lower the price, which lets you kill the competition. That's not what's happening. In platform companies, they're all driven by network effects or demand economies of scale. Microsoft still has dominant market share in desktop. Android, something like 80% in mobile. Facebook still has the dominant social network. Alibaba and Amazon, the dominant merchants in China and the United States. WeChat is so staggering and important in China that even the beggars take WeChat Pay. But a demand economy, a network effect, is a product or service that gets more valuable as more people use it, which attracts users, which creates value, which attracts users. So that's the demand curve shifting out. What that means is managerial attention has to shift outside the firm from inside. Any market with network effects has to shift to outside attention because you can't scale network effects inside as easily as outside. There are simply more resources. So I teach in a business school, and I would argue that every single one of the traditional value creating activities, whether it's finance, human resources, research, strategy, marketing, technology, or operations, all of them must take on external value creating counterparts. Now, we've only got 30 minutes. I'm going to focus on the IT today, the technology, the APIs. But as a quick overview, in marketing, we move from push to pull, outbound to inbound messaging, where users create messages. In human resources, there's now often freelancers as opposed to employees. In strategy, we've gone from creating barriers to entry to permissionless entry of production consumption on top of the platform. Alibaba and Amazon want as many merchants on the store as possible. Uber wants the drivers on its platform and not others. Airbnb wants the rooms on its platform. So it's permissionless entry of production consumption from the outside. So what's going on in technology? What scales? So here's where things get interesting. And here's where we start to move into APIs. Now this used to animate, but unfortunately we don't get the animation. So we'll just do the whole thing. What scales? Scale happens from internal to external as you move from internal employees to external crowds. That's on the lower bar. All right, it makes perfect sense. There are more people outside, so you can get more scale outside. But they also scale as you move from bottom to top, tangible or human resources to intangible and data resources. So as you move in the first column, an internal from employees to algorithms, you can do more with software. But the really, really powerful one is where you get scale with APIs as you go outside with digital resources. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That's why APIs matter. APIs let you scale value creation outside the organization. Okay? For those of you that are interested, we have a short article on this. It actually gives the details. So it's digital transformation as firm inversion. The summary is that those that did not use APIs lost market share. Those that used APIs for internal use cases did get some small gains, and those that used APIs for external use cases had 38% growth in market cap over 16 years. That's the summary. So what are the data? What did we find? Okay, so what's API value here? So let me give you the details of what we did. These are the facts. We got the private API data from 239 public companies. We also scraped all the data from the programmable web. We then matched that to CompuState data on firms' performance and also a couple of other data sets so that we could actually do rigorous econometric testing. What we examined was the following. A firm moves forward in its value-creating activities, then it opens APIs, then it gets new value-creating activities. So there's an intervention. The intervention is the point in time when they first list their first open public API. We could track the market cap with that intervention. So here's what we found. And actually we also classified APIs based on whether or not they were B2B. So this was upward facing in the supply chain, whether they were internal, so they were mostly for internal employees, or whether they were B2C facing downstream customers. The first implication was that in a mere 2 years or so, we saw an average 4% gain in market cap. The average firm in our company was 2.3 billion in our data set, was $2.3 billion. The implication is you're getting a 86 million increase in market value by those firms that used APIs. There's controls for any number of things. So this was in the first couple of periods, and as we extended it to all 16 years, it continued growing, not quite as much, but it continued growing at a rate of 38% over 16 years. So the APIs actually created value. In addition, here's a summary of what we found on the accounting data. So on the left column is revenues, costs, and net income. And we found that the B2C APIs improved revenue a bit, they decreased cost a little bit, and they increased the net income a bit. Interestingly, there was a bit more revenue generated on the B2B APIs. That was perhaps because they were automating large processes in there. Also, it's interesting that the internal APIs, quite logically, were some of the ones that cut some of the most cost out of it. So those were also some of the benefits of using the APIs. There is one fascinating caution. Okay, or there's one other element of this too. By the way, the ones that opened APIs got a 12-fold increase in the value of their R&D budgets. That is, others are starting to create value on their own behalf. Note, by the way, this is conditional on having developer followers. If no one uses your open API, you don't get that benefit. But if you have developer followers building on your open APIs, there was a huge multiplier on the value of the research done by the company. There is, however, a downside. We also matched the data to data breaches. Those companies that opened public APIs also experienced an annual rate of 13.5% increase in data breaches. So yes, you do get some data exposure. What this means is you have to plan more carefully. To show you, from the private data, we actually are able to track the data flows across the APIs. What we see here is the reported hack event at time 0. Clearly, the hack event occurred 1 to 2 quarters before then. You can actually see the change in data. So it wasn't reported for 2 quarters. But notice what's really interesting. This is the amount of data flowing across the API membrane. There's a huge increase in variance. So at the hack event, which occurs 2 quarters earlier, there's a spike in some increase. That's the 95% confidence interval in data flowing across the membrane. There's also a huge spike down in data flowing across the membrane. What's this mean? Basically, the companies that knew what they were doing detected the data breach and shut things down. The companies that weren't paying attention got robbed. Their data went through the roof, and it was one of the indicators that, in fact, they had been breached. So it was really quite interesting how that actually worked. This one is a synthetic econometric control of the firms that did not adopt APIs. What's really interesting is that this matches the data perfectly in 20 quarters before, and in 20 quarters afterwards, the firms that did not adopt open APIs had an implied gap in market value of $8.4 billion. In effect, those that failed to adopt API strategies were the laggards. They were not able to actually create as much value as the other firms. So that's the data. Those are the facts. And that's why one should invest in APIs. How would you compare investments in technology to other investments in corporate valuation? So what about importance of architecture relative to other things? Well, again, unfortunately, we don't have the animation, so you just have to read straight across. But we got data from some other companies looking at ways of increasing value. Here, we want to look at the data for marketing to acquire users. That would be customer acquisition cost. Discounts to attract users in a two-sided market. So you just run sales. A third is the design of network effects, so users create value for one another. And a fourth is the design of architecture, so you reduce disintermediation so that they don't leave. Using Groupon data, we're able to discover that the average value of a user was about $54. That's on the bottom. Marketing to acquire a Groupon user lost money. It lost about $16. Why? The real reason is that Groupon is a leaky bucket. Once someone comes in, they try the product and they leave. They go back direct to the customer. The subsequent transactions do not occur on platform. What about sales? Sales prices could go either you're reducing your merchant fees or you're reducing the price to the customer. Those didn't have much effect. It was minus $0.75 or 75 cents. The real value is when you start to design network effects, so that users are creating value for other users or merchants are attracting other consumers, or using APIs to design the architecture to keep subsequent transactions on platform to thwart disintermediation. The increment, $87, is more than the baseline value of an individual user at $54. So again, architecture matters. So compared to other things such as marketing or discounting, these are wiser investments. These are other just data. If we compare directly with a Chinese company that did what we are proposing, if you compare Groupon versus Meituan, Groupon, the coupons are redeemed at the merchant. Subsequent business happens with the merchant. The order averages 2 times per year. Meituan, which started 2 years later, is much more sophisticated. It's a Chinese company that does exactly the same things, group discounts. Delivery occurs through platform. Payment occurs through platform. Oh, excuse me about that. Sorry about that. That's the doctor for COVID. Sorry. They use data to identify missing products so they can identify new things to sell. They recommend new store locations, and users order an average of 26 times per year. It's not surprising that Meituan has 5 times the user value and 56 times the market cap. It's really quite interesting. So one last thought is to show you the design of network effects. So it helps to be clear on what we mean by network effects. Everyone has this idea of connectivity, but I think we can actually be more precise about it. So some of the work I did originally was helping to do the math models of same-side and cross-side network effects and the pricing of those network effects. So same side is users attracting users or merchants attracting merchants or developers helping developers. Cross side is developers attracting users attracting developers, or hosts attracting guests. That's the cross side on the platform. Now, again, these should animate, but notice these feedback loops could be positive or negative. Your task is to design positive, because anytime those feedback loops are negative, so suppose merchants create a bad interaction for consumers, then they leave, then they're off platform. Suppose that data rights management makes it hard to interact. Advertising is clutter. In those cases, you hurt the network effect and you're creating negative feedback. So your task is to create positive feedback. And there's several different tools for doing it. So it's not just the connectivity. I want to give you a more sophisticated way of thinking about network effects, okay? On the left are the explicit network effects. Everyone recognizes connectivity. That's social networks. There are also the explicit networks in ratings and user-generated content. So that's TikTok, that's YouTube videos, that's Amazon ratings, where users are creating other value for users and making recommendations. But don't forget the implicit, and this is where things get interesting. So one is the magnetism, where you take the friction out, so developers can come and attract users, or riders can attract drivers, all on a nexus of attraction. And the one that's typically missed is recommender systems. That genuinely is a network effect. Why? Because it's a product or service that gets better as more people use it. You take recommendations from one and help them make better recommendations to another. So that's another way of thinking about the issue. But don't stop there. And here's where it gets really interesting. Machine learning is not only able to recommend products, a book out on the long tail. It can reduce customer churn. It can, improve inventory churn. But what it can also do is identify missing products that you don't yet have. So you could use it as a design tool to suggest movies or books or other products that are not yet in your portfolio. I like to describe this as the content industry's house of cards problem. Because originally, Reed Hastings tried to sell Netflix, excuse me, to Blockbuster, and they said, you don't have anything of value. We control the customer and you're not creating any content. Netflix used its recommender system to actually match people to books. And what was really interesting is in 2013, they used it to predict the success of House of Cards. Literally the expression House of Cards. So that was extremely successful, but it didn't stop there. They could use it to predict the success of other content, such as The Queen's Gambit. Fascinatingly, Netflix won 10 Golden Globe Awards in 2021, more than any other TV producer of all. Similarly, interestingly enough, Amazon produced Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. You can use your recommender systems to actually design content, not simply to recognize content. So it's a different way of thinking about many of these different issues in here. So we'll stop there. I wanted to give you then several different ideas. The first of these is that technology is strategy. It's not just infrastructure. And I think the technologists need to be better appreciated in the C-suite because you define what's open. You define what's a partner. You make possible what innovations can happen on top of an existing ecosystem. The second point is that giant platforms truly are different. They are what I call inverted firms. That means much of the value is created outside, not just inside. They're driven by network effects. Why? Because network effects cannot scale inside as easily as outside. But it also explains the phenomenon why these firms are so valuable and yet they have so few assets. Their capital base is smaller, their employee base tends to be smaller. What they've done is succeeded in harnessing third-party innovation that changes the game. Entrants overtake incumbents because they innovate faster. They're accumulating value at a faster pace. APIs are key to this process. They're key to innovation and scale. That map that I showed you goes from internal to external and from tangible to intangible, and APIs are in that top quadrant. We showed you the econometric data. Firms that opened APIs, public APIs, gained a 4% market cap, 38% in 16 years. There is a downside. You do get increased risk of hack. But notice, relative to the non-adopters, they lose ground, they lose market share. The smarter firms definitely do better. But what I want to leave you with is that last thought is don't just stop there with the technology. You can design the network effects to grow your platform and to grow your algorithms. You can do better than the marketing department. You can actually have more impact by changing the disintermediation, by changing the innovation trajectory, by changing the transactions being on platform. Use your data, use machine learning, and use APIs because they are critical to all of this happening. So I will stop there and see if I can handle any questions. Thank you. So are there any questions, maybe anything else?
Yeah, thank you very much, Marshall. I was trying to read them all. Yes, the first thing is about so you say that it's mostly public API companies, right? In your first research, the API, I think it was the impact on APIs on firm performance, it was mostly targeted on internal APIs, right? And we've seen that there's, even the revenue were not so different. There was mostly a higher market valuation, from companies. But
Yes.
This new study is really about public ones, right?
So what's interesting is, quite candidly, the productivity gains, the increase in revenue and the decrease in costs alone do not explain the changes in market cap. The market cap is disproportionate relative to the changes in the actual revenue flows. What's really interesting, though, and why I think market cap changes is because I believe the effect is business stealing. In effect, what is happening is that they're growing at a faster pace and taking market share from their competitors. And if companies or if investors believe that companies that are opening their APIs can actually grow at this faster pace, then of course they will overtake the other companies. So I believe that that's what's actually happening as to why the market share gains, or sorry, the market value gains are so outsized compared to the net income and net cost changes.
Yeah, so would you agree with the statement saying that thanks to APIs, you are able to address all the potential long tail channels that it would be too costly to address yourself, but because you use let's say a discovery mechanism, you are finally able to address, let's say, a lot more that you were able to address before.
So that's fundamental. That's essential. The reason why that's important, I like to phrase that differently. Having an open ecosystem where your partners can add value allows people you don't know to bring you ideas you don't have, or people you don't know to bring you products you don't have. The reason that's important is that it fills out that long tail portfolio because you clearly didn't have all the ideas or the resources yourself. That, by the way, means you have to reward them, because if you try to take all of the value of the third parties that are bringing things to you, then they will stop bringing things to you. So you have to reward people for joining your ecosystem. But it is absolutely the case. What's happening is you're filling out niches on the long tail that you couldn't afford to fill yourself.
But the thing, so there is a statement that there is often shared at these conferences, is that we have more engineers, experts, money, innovators outside the company than inside. So finally, with APIs, you're finally able to orchestrate them and aggregate them, attract them versus trying to have everything, the theory of the firm, putting everything as an internet transaction. So finally, it seems APIs are able to orchestrate external transactions better than internal transactions, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I think those are really important. So again, you're able to attract other parties outside the organization. This is one where I'd like to mention, my friends, Sam Jamney. Sorry, I'm losing it with the COVID. Sam Ramji. I think Chet Kapoor is speaking on some of these issues tomorrow. Brian Kirshner. You have to invest in the external community. You have to reward them. You have to treat your developers like gold. If you don't do that, they won't join you. Another way I like to describe it is, it's like throwing a dinner party where nobody comes. If one party has got chips and Diet Coke, and the other has a sushi buffet and Nastasia Kinski or some other famous actors showing up, where do people show up? You want to reward, you want to invest in the developer ecosystem. So you have to reward your developers in order to bring them to your ecosystem. Remember, I showed you that multiplier on the R&D is huge, but it only happens if you get developer followers. You don't get that if you don't have developer followers. So you absolutely have to treat your developers like gold. Otherwise, they'll work for somebody else. It's a very straightforward proposition.
We have a question about the value that needs to be shared. How would you help companies to determine what value needs to be shared? Like, for example, the App Store Apple ecosystem is 30% that needs to be took back in exchange of the let's say the exposure to the whole iPhone users on the App Store. How would you help people to understand the value that needs to be shared when you open APIs?
Well, two thoughts on that. First of all, 30% is too high. They're taking too much of the value, and they're able to do that effectively because of the kind of bimodal monopolies in mobile operating systems. For reference, I'm also talking with some of the antitrust authorities in the U.S. and in Europe, and I think we're going to be able to crack those open ways. I think we'll leave more of the value for the developers. But there's a different issue, which is how is value being added? So I like to describe a platform as an open architecture with rules of governance for facilitating interactions. It's the interactions that create the value. You have to figure out what proportion of an interaction you're bringing value to and what proportion of the value is the third party bringing value to. It's a little hard to say in advance because, again, if people are bringing you new value propositions, right, things you hadn't thought of, there may be, maybe you're creating a lot of value by bringing the initial tools. Maybe they're bringing more value by bringing a completely new market. So it's a little hard to say exactly what those shares should be. But what you want to do is to look at the interaction and see who's adding value to which part of that interaction and let them keep the lion's share. Whatever investments they're making, whatever value they're creating, they should be keeping the lion's share of the value that they're creating. And you can try to measure the value. The way to do that is to look at the value of individual interaction and the volume of all of the interactions. Use those to sum that value, and you give them that share.
Let's take the example of Facebook, for example. In 2010, 2007, they opened they opened the first API, with the Facebook Connect, or Connect with Facebook and the like and stuff. In 2010, they have their first graph API, where you are allowed to almost get the list of all the friends when you add a Facebook button. And so like this is where we've seen so many companies go viral, like the Zynga of the time, the games, the Farmville, the Mafia Wars, and all the craziness about like making Facebook a huge application ecosystem thanks to APIs. In 2014, they reduced the scope of the API, right? They said, okay, we will not able to share the whole friends list. It's only friends of the same. So it seems they allowed a lot of value to be shared to be winning the developer ecosystem. So developers could create apps with a huge amount of users in an extreme viral way. But when they reached over 1 billion users, they kind of reduced. And of course, with the scandal of privacy, whatever that happened. So it seems the business of opening is the closing at the end, right? And they seem to have managed the value shared depending on how viral they want it to be. So, and funny enough, they had this reciprocity rule. They say you can use your API for free as long as we consider reciprocity in our relationship. So it was not even a number. You can use it as much as you want, as long we feel there is reciprocity in value in the term. So how would you analyze these elements?
So I gotta say, this is a much, much longer conversation. There are a lot of different elements of this. So one of them is that it's quite common as platforms are getting off the ground to be more generous with resources and investments and royalties as they get off the ground than they are after they've achieved critical mass and they've effectively squelched a lot of the competition. So it's quite common for them to be more generous initially and less generous later. I think Tim O'Reilly has similar observations about that. Also, in Facebook's case, we got to remember, then they started not wanting scrutiny. Then they started getting Cambridge Analytica. Then they started getting Russian interference. Then they started getting researchers learning some fairly unattractive things about them. And so they turned off the APIs. If I'm not mistaken, there was a great study done at New York University that was trying to look at misinformation in advertisements. And they'd gotten permission from 6,300 users to do that. And Facebook turned off the APIs, claiming that was the advertisers' data. No, that's not true, because clearly they had said users should have the ability to determine for themselves what's going on. How are you going to determine for yourselves if you're not given the benchmarking tools, if you're denied the benchmarking tools in this? So Facebook deserves a little bit of knocking around, in my view, for closing off those APIs. This is the longer part of the conversation, okay? For reference, there is a way to solve that problem. And this actually is the regulatory level as well as the technological level. So we proposed a new data right, which we call an in situ data right, which I believe that many of you are already looking at. The concept is quite simple. You bring the algorithm to the data rather than ripping the data out of the infrastructure. The beauty of this is you can then see all the context for that data. It retains its potency. And if a user wanted to get third-party benchmarking in to see the data, they could do so because they would have the data right, an in situ data right, to import whatever algorithm they wanted. The beauty of this is twofold. Here, for users, the user becomes the choke point or the bottleneck. And so Different companies competing to bring their algorithms to those data will then ask for permission from the user. So guess what? The user as the control point will get more of the value. Second point is the business opportunities for API developers should explode. So, in terms of running these kinds of things, I strongly encourage you to take a look. We have some other research on in situ data rights. I can actually share that as well. And we believe this will be adopted in Europe, and I think we're trying to get this adopted in the United States as well. If it's adopted, it will really crack open these kinds of things, huge development opportunities for the API community, but also huge wealth creating opportunities for the user communities themselves, pulling power back from the big monopoly platforms and giving it to the technologists and to the user. So I think there's some really interesting ways we can solve that problem.
Yeah, really glad to share the news. I think Albert Wenger from Union Square Venture, he had this TED talk about the, I think it was, the right to be represented by a bot at some point. So you have, and Mike Amundsen, a speaker on our conferences, say bots on the net. So instead of web pages and with crawlers to be able to see what's the data available on the web page, we would have this in situ, let's say personal data or whatever data, and bots and algorithm will come and ask for permissions on your pod or whatever to crawl it, and finally to import this algorithm versus being always owned by someone else. So I think, in situ data, right, we'll love to share the data. We have a question about API neutrality. So against a monopoly, the FCC sued few, at least following Facebook for unfair use of APIs. And also some other companies. But the thing is, would you consider that as a platform, you must or you need or you should stay neutral in who consumes your APIs, or do you need to decide who is able to use it or not, even if it can give a really bad, let's say, trust signal, right, for future users? We've seen Twitter, for example, breaking APIs many times, selecting apps on the platform. LinkedIn also breaking APIs for competitors. What would be the fair way to accumulate value and trustworthiness opening APIs?
So that's a tricky question. So there are good arguments on both sides to that question. So one understands the desire for neutrality between different ecosystem partners trying to gain fair, unmoderated access. At the same time, the reason we have intellectual property laws, patents, copyrights, trade secrets, is to foster innovation. We want companies to invest in the first place. To give you an analogy, one of the European proposals had been to give all search data to small search companies the moment it's available. That totally destroys the innovation incentive. So I believe that there are two ways to balance those interests properly. One of them is to borrow the same kinds of ideas that we're currently using in intellectual property law. So one might be, you want to encourage firms to create new APIs. You want them to be able to do new things. That, just like a patent, should entitle them, because they made the investment and they invented it, that should entitle them to proprietary use of that technology, at least for a spell. But like the expiration of a patent, at some point in the future, maybe then it becomes available, and then it's a discussion about when it becomes available, not whether it becomes available, okay? So the discussion about whether it becomes available, now or never, that's not helpful. So what we need to do is to set a horizon when that's the case. That's solution number one. The second solution to that is to create a technological layer, literally the API layer, and then allow different parties under FRAND, under fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory economic terms, bid for access, and that includes the vertically integrated portion of the company as well as third parties. The virtue of that one is that the individual value stacks on top also then provide the economic resources for the construction of the infrastructure in the first place. So, by creating this separation layer and then allowing the different parties to pay at reasonable rates, you then distinguish between who gets to and who doesn't get it, but they're buying it, in effect. They're buying it on fair terms, as opposed to simply forcing it open to everybody. So method one is to allow them to keep it proprietary for a while and then later open it to everybody. Method two is do a technological separation and allow different components, including the internal division, to buy access at fair rates. Then the original inventor also gets compensated. So either of those methods can work.
Yeah, last question. So it seems, when you have an API, you have a kind of monopoly on a specific asset, and you are able to share it with who you want, depending on the license contract or whatever, to make it open for others or to not allow others, some parts of the market to use it. So it really behaves, as you said, like a patent license. You have a monopoly on an asset, and you license it the way you want to the people you want in the area you want, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me just briefly mention, I don't know if others can see it, but I just posted several of the articles describing what we've been talking about in the chat. So I hope everyone can access them. This includes the in situ data rights. It includes the digital transformation and firm inversion. And for the not so faint of heart, there's even an academic article complete with the econometrics. That one's hard to read, but that's the one that proves that it's that it actually works as opposed to just hand waving. So anyone, entirely happy to take questions on any of those things if those are valuable to people.
Yeah, you've shared it in the private chat for speakers. We will share it on the public chat for everyone, for sure. Thank you very much, Marshall, for being with us and answering these advanced questions and, let's say, deep platforms, networks effect, two-sided networks economics. Again, we will love to have follow-ups, knowing your next papers and articles in the community. We're really glad to have you. Take care of yourself. Thank you for being there, even you've been diagnosed positively to COVID. And see you next time in the Apidays community.
Thanks. I look forward to catching up under better circumstances. Thanks. Take care.
Take care, Marshall. Bye. Yes, we were really glad to have this really, really advanced talk there. And again, I will show you, we'll continue the discussion with a deep research we've done on what we call the API landscape, the 1100, let's say, API tooling companies composing the API landscapes. We have all the numbers, and that we baptized the state of the API industry. So I invite you to know more, right? And follow this to end these two keynotes as deep research on the API industry. Yes, so let me just share the right let me just share the right slide now. Tac. I'll even share my screen. That will be easier. Just 1 second for it to be open. That happens, like all technical issues all the time, right? So why not me? Of course, it will be added soon. Again, if you have any question, you can ask that directly. Okay, they're here. I'm finding them. Okay, let's share the full screen. That will be easier. Doesn't want to go full screen. Okay, let's try another version. Okay, it should work now. Okay. Sorry for these 1 or 2 minutes. Tell me if that's fine. Yes, I think it's working. Yes, it's working perfectly. So yeah, let's share this API industry state of the market. It's updated for June 2022, right? Again, my name is Mehdi Medjawi. You can follow me on Twitter. This is our last publication. Let's say different books. One on continuous API management, published by O'Reilly as the second edition. Also, a European Commission report on API programming interfaces in governments, why, what, and how. And also a research report on GDPR data portability, the forgotten right, explaining a little bit why actually we should have in situ personal data, as Marcia Von Elstein was sharing earlier. This is what we will talk about. We will talk about the API landscape, right? The 1,100 companies composing the API tooling landscape. Again, we'll try to dive more into that and explain binary numbers, what's happening. You can actually follow it live and watch and use this interactive version on apilandscape.apiscene.io. So I let you some time to read it and go there, apilandscape.apiscene.io. And again, you will be able to see that actually the landscape is composed by 5 main sections. The first one is API Lifecycle Platforms. That's the first one. The second one is backend building tools, API as a product and business process as a service, right? So really API companies who are just APIs or delivering a product directly delivered by an API as an API. The fourth one is integration platform as a service, right? To integrate a lot of APIs in the same time, like big SDKs, and then there is virtual API abstraction and API aggregators, right? So being a single point of integration for many different APIs. Currently, it's the cumulative funding to date over the last 10 years is $174 billion, right? Depending on the different part of the landscape, mostly on the API lifecycle platforms. We've seen
excuse me, but you are not in full screen. In full screen mode. You're not in presentation mode. Can you do this, please?
Is it full screen now?
No, it is not.
Okay, let me go back. StreamYard and okay, so the slide are not even moving, right?
No.
Okay, I understand. Maybe it will work now.
Yes.
Okay, so sorry for what happened. So latest publication, different books and research on APIs for European Commission and for data portability. Again, this is the landscape. This is the landscape as you can see it. And as I was saying, you can go on apilandscape.apiscene.io to watch it. Sorry for what happened. And this is the different section I was talking to you about: the lifecycle platforms, backend building, API as a product, integration platform as a service, and vertical API abstractions. As I was saying, it's worth $174 billion, right, on different parts of the landscape, mostly by API lifecycle platforms, which represent $100 billion. But again, there's many acquisitions. So in the calculation, sometimes when there are 2 acquisitions, it counts as a cumulative funding. So we will see exactly why it's there. Also, the number of ecosystem enablers. Again, the business process as a service really engaged by the startup movement, like really represent the more number in the subcategories. Really followed by API lifecycle platforms, backend building tools, and we can see other like integration platform as a service or integration platform as a service for the different numbers. And again, so we'll dive into all these 5 all together, right? What trends and strategic takeaways we see from this API industry landscape, right? So that's extremely important. The first one is that API management has become a commodity leading to new open source growth. Why we're saying that? So market research agencies estimated the value of the API management market at an estimate between around 1.8 billion, with to reach 13 billion by 2028. So that's a compound annual growth rate of 8%, which is quite good. So it seems the API management market is reaching maturity, this plateau of productivity of the life of the hype cycle, but because of a lot of recent consolidation and acquisition, right? So this is the last 10 years acquisition. So you can see almost all the software providers, large software providers or technology providers, have acquired API management solutions, companies and startups. Larger one are Broadcom, but also Google, IBM, Axway, Salesforce, TIBCO, Talent, Oracle, Microsoft, or Perforce, all acquired API management solution directly. So yes, but that led to a lot of open source creation. So we have recent open source companies who raised a lot of money: Gravity, Kong, Nginx, Solo.io, 3Scale, TAC, and WSO2. So WSO2 has been there for a longer time, but yes, because of this commoditization, more and more open source companies are able to take a part of the value because they're leaving the assets but orchestrating the use of the users. So these new open source project has now like a really growing company and trying to get some value that has been captured by previous software vendors because they are now acquired. So the thing is that smaller middle market are not their top priority for these big vendors. So yeah, these new players can actually tackle this middle market. The trend one we've seen on top of that is the explosion of tech regulation. So we've seen tech regulation, especially in the API industry, for example, in the healthcare industry with the HL7 fire or the smart challenge. Yes, so that's really a trend pushed by the regulation where APIs are really at the center of the ecosystem. There is also the GDPR aspect, the data protection aspect, right? Because at the end of 2023, 60 countries will have a GDPR-like regulation covering 2/3 of the population. So this portability right, ability to share data will be actually huge, also pushed by the regulation. There's also the open banking aspect. We will talk it right later, but the open banking aspect in many countries has been pushed by the fact that banks were obliged to open APIs to force innovation in these industries. The thing, because of this regulation, we see industry-specific solutions emerge in banking, government, insurance, and healthcare because of what we just talked about. So in the landscape, you can see some tools dedicated for banking, finance, and insurance backends, or API aggregators. So I invite you to see it in the landscape. A few examples, some company just raised Yapily 50 million or TrueLayer 70 million just for API management for open banking. Of course, there's a regulation obliging to open APIs in banking. So there will be API management for open banking. Some vendor like Axway just tried a new open banking platform in Brazil, where the regulation just came out. Also, some vendor, Gravity, they received accreditation to integrate financial-grade APIs into their solution. So you can see this specialization to find back value for most API management vendors. Funny enough, WSO2 received funding, so an open source management solution leader, received funding from Goldman Sachs to extend their banking finance specific open source feature set. Like a bank is funding an API management solution to do more API tooling for the banking market. I also want to share some initiative like the Open Insurance Initiative. It's like 60 insurers who don't wait for the regulation, but who are preparing to open APIs for that. And then we go to our trend 3, which is API security. That's now a standalone product, where privacy is actually the next differentiation maker. So you're familiar with the DevSecOps approach, where what we call shift left, shield right. So we try to detect security issues early in the development process, and we shield right. So we know we secure, let's say, the infrastructure by having a lot of firewall and gateways and things to be sure that even if a defect has gone through the development process, actually it's still secured and covered. So yeah, but this DevSecOps approach enabled the creation of many tools, and which are now a standalone market. Also, because of COVID, we've seen lots and lots of digital adoption, in many different industries. Because of the last 2 years where we're not able to go in physical stores anymore. And the trend forward that we've seen is that APIs are a new layer of business in tech infrastructure. So again, I would love this quote from the founder and CEO of Twilio. The world is getting broken down into APIs, as every part of the stack of business that eventually a developer might need to build is eventually turning into APIs that developer can use. So it's in the book, Ask Your Developer. We really recommend that book. Twilio is a great API company, but this is really a little bit what we have seen in the supply chain industry. Like, the main role of a car manufacturer is to orchestrate the delivery, the production, the delivery, the manufacturing, and the selling of 100 of suppliers, right? And actually, the goal is to design and assemble and sell, right? Things that are mostly made by other providers. So this is a little bit what we see with APIs. With APIs, actually, the role of an organization is to look for piece of software that then they can integrate into their application production process, mixed with the one they do internally, to reopen one to others, like sell or distribute, to redistribute others for their customers and users. In the landscape, you can see these 374 tools, which are specific emailing, messaging, communication platforms, payments, special AI, machine learning, accounting, audio, video APIs, right? Just as a piece of software that just do one thing that will be orchestrated into something else. You can see the valuation of the top valuation of some companies in that space. Again, because it's like in the car industry, when the car market is small, you cannot live by doing just one piece of the car selling to all car manufacturers. But when the car market is huge with hundreds of millions of cars, actually you can just sell one piece, but because it's distributed and sold to all the cars, which is a huge market, you can actually be a huge company just providing tooling for cars. It's the same for digital infrastructure. As more and more companies invest in digital infrastructure, you can be a company that provide one piece of this big digital infrastructure and to be able to be a large company with that. There is also a new tech stack, like new open standards, like the Open API Initiative specification, the Async API specification, and other like gRPC, JSON Schema, GraphQL, Vulkan, JSON-LD, which are open source standards that actually, enable large-scale API production. Also, that's one part why it's really part of digital infrastructure. And again, so if you mix the two, what we have, you have Lego brick economy, where, for example, this is a representation for payment services. Actually, from core banking to card wallet transfer, acquisition of users or acquisition of customers, you can have many pieces, Lego bricks, that you can assemble to build different part of the banking as a service. You can make payment services mixing 3 or 4 elements of the market. You can build huge companies just by mixing some available APIs from what others are doing. And so banks, you can actually completely rebuild the bank with the banking as a service APIs there. So again, this new business stack and open technology stack is enabling this Lego brick economy. The trend number 5 is what we call the low code and the growth of citizen developers. So the business people who are not technical, don't have the technical background, but will be able to build application mixing APIs together. So you can know some platforms like Zapier or Retool or AppSheet, acquired by Google for $2 billion, to show you the strategy. Actually, these platforms enable you to mix APIs together and to do valuable recipes to mixing APIs together. So when someone tag me on LinkedIn, please send me an email and make a copy into my Dropbox, right? This orchestration of different services can be actually really useful, but it can be also in a business. Look, when someone feel a type form on my website, please put the data on Google Sheet and send me a text message so I can call them directly, right? So this citizen developer application, like can be business applications, will be enabled with this low-code movement that we have identified as trend number 5. So many drivers for this low-code trend. So IT teams are not well enough staffed, so business teams don't want to wait. There are already internal APIs that already exist, so that can expose data and functionality that can be orchestrated into a new workflow. The SaaS tools, right, are now dedicating to mix APIs together, right? And also the customer demand is already there, so we need to deliver faster. And we will see that now we have even some no-code tools, no-code schools, right? Schools to learn to how to no-code, right? So that can be funny even to say. So to sum up this first part before going into the update, yes, so API management is growing fast, but creating new open source communities. Regulation enforcing the publishing and the use of APIs are creating also new opportunities for specialization, which is the third trend. So there is specialization into banking, healthcare, supply chain, and insurance, pushed by regulation. Because of the post-COVID digitization, API security is now a standalone market with pure API security product, right? And so we see some new privacy features, which actually we believe will be a next part of the landscape. APIs are a new type of business infrastructure with a new technical stack based on open source standards. And again, the trend number 5, citizen developers are the next API users and consumers. So let's do the 6-month update since last research, what we have seen. So we have seen that open banking, right, there is has been a big push into what we call API-enabled digital infrastructure, right? So this is the number of, for example, API calls in billions who have been made in open banking. So almost 10 billion in UK, 4.2 in the US, and Brazil just coming with a new regulation. We've seen also the API increasing API traffic. So, for example, the Salt Security report showed that amongst 250 customers, we've seen a growth of 221 annual growth from API traffic, right? The API provider focus is really on industry verticals, right? So a lot of API providers have dedicated page on banking and finance for marketing, right? So we've seen 287 out of 1,100, 166 contain pages for health, 105 for governments, and 558 in total represent these industry verticals. And we've seen also API skills as a top of workforce demand because we've seen 33,000 new jobs advertised in Q2 where API are related in the job offer. So since the last 6 months, we added 118 tool providers since our last publication. So you can see in orange the difference in funding compared to the existing market. So it's kind of significant. We can still a significant growth on the numbers and on the funding. We've seen also a lot of patents. So 59 patents in the US mentioned directly APIs, right? With larger enterprise like IBM, Fujitsu, and Salesforce. We've seen also some lower from smaller companies and startups in the space like Stoplight, who are also registering their innovation in APIs. Few examples about some companies recently added, just to give you a hint. Content Stack, a headless CMS, right? So CMS API powered. Teach Lab, an API security company. Again, we're saying API security was a specific layer. And Pinwheel, a data analytics and algorithm platform, right? Just for payroll, right? So just to tell you, yes, payroll is now business as a service that can be integrated directly by an API. So in the total number of investment is like 20 billion total in new investment. And again, we've seen more and more funding in that space, as you can see. But let's say the top funding is really on the API Lifecycle Platforms or business process as a service. We're really catching up on the space. So this is an example of company who raised at least 100 million, who have a clear API strategy, open API strategy. We've seen Quanto, an open banking application, Software AG, a software vendor, Apollo, a tool doing a platform for GraphQL technologies, Mambu, again, a SaaS platform for banks. So really open banking is really pushing, and you can see the different type of companies, mostly on the vendor side, for specific industries who are raising more than 100 million in the last 6 months. The API industry is an employment powerhouse, adding more than 500,000 jobs to the global market. Again, there are 33,000 open positions, but over the last 6 months, it has been at least 500,000 jobs that has been filled. So we see a lot of movement. A lot of people are moving in that space, and a lot of jobs opportunities are there. Again, this data is obtained via LinkedIn, right? So the employment opportunities, again, is mostly on the API Lifecycle Platforms, pushed by the API security. So the percentage of growth is almost 300%. So the tooling ecosystem is really thriving in that space. We've seen a lower in the integration platform as a service, because actually they are shifting to API Lifecycle Platforms. So this is really what we have seen. The number of advertised position is really now on the API Lifecycle Platforms, where cannibalizing all the space. So we made 5 predictions, and I'll finish for the last 4 minutes we have. So with the prediction we said regulation are impacting. Yes, regulation, we had new regulation updates, the Data Governance Act in Europe, the European Health Data Space also implementing FHIR APIs. In the US, we have an executive direction from the White House to enable bank account switching by API, like the start of open banking. We've seen also the Access Act, for interoperability for API users, for end users by APIs. And in Brazil, we have new open insurance regulation who started, and also a data access rights to be introduced. So this privacy regulation aspect is also giving opportunities. We talk about the industry-specific solution, and again, we can continue on healthcare, on finance. We've seen some funding, some vendors, again, launching some new solutions. We can remind the Goldman Sachs investment into an API management solution, direct funding, again. So we can see that the trend is actually confirmed. The other one is the API security. So we can see that the larger API security problems, one of the larger API security problems is the sensitive data exposure, which tells you that privacy is actually becoming also an important concern. So API security and privacy will be a standalone product directly in the industry. The trend 4 is that the new layer of infrastructure. So you can see that some companies have been opening APIs and being huge platforms like Shopify, Salesforce, Adobe, Atlassian, Zoom, and others. And again, so they are a part of infrastructure, and opening APIs to also help others to build. So they're really part of, they're a piece of infrastructure of the global value chain. Shopify for CMS for sales, Salesforce for customer relationship management, and others, right? Just to say, 98% of organizations interviewed see APIs are essential to their digital stack. The last one, and we'll be done there, the no-code aspect. So just an example, a few months ago, we celebrated in the US the National No-Code Day. All right, so and some company like Allegria Group, for example, they do no-code bootcamp to learn how to no-code. So now you have code bootcamp to learn how to code, and no-code bootcamp how to no-code, right? Yeah, I don't know how you call them, like no-coder or coder of no-code, or I don't know. But some people call them like citizen developers, all right? So non-technical background people, but who are still able to understand how to mix business logic applications to finally build something relevant. Thank you very much for this. Sorry for a technical issue at the beginning. We don't have time for questions. It will be time for the break. But yes, you can visit the landscape on apilandscape.apiscene.io. Right, so let you a few seconds to read the address. And thank you very much. We're going for a break for 20 minutes, and we'll be back on the different tracks we have, the business track on platforms and product strategies, the technical track on the new API stack, and the roundtable and workshops. Thank you very much.